Hello everyone, just thought I'd introduce you to our Connecting the Dots on Behaviour report that we have launched. We have our open day this Saturday at our office in Morley, so you can obviously see this in a bit more detail, but I thought I'd go through some actual visuals of what the report would look like. So this is just an example report, this one here. Obviously no personal information is getting shared, but here we are. So we have overall a bit of a background as to the child and what they're doing. We look at what we know already, where they're presenting any difficulties, where is it the parents and caregivers are sort of not struggling in that lack of information, or what they're misunderstanding. So we basically just start to break down some of the kind of knowns and unknowns. For certain children, we would look at additional notes such as pregnancy, birth, and early years. For some, it might not be needed. Obviously, some might have a bit more detail in there. We then have a quick overview of what's already in place educational wise and setting wise, just again small notes to say, and again we can track and assess if they've got EHCP already in place, and really build up a bit more depth of any of that child's additional needs, or highlighting areas where maybe suggestions for reasonable adjustments and such could go in place, especially more so on the sensory profiling that I'll cover shortly, that might already help. So we can look through, is school meeting needs, and again, what does that look like? Probably if they're coming home still dysregulated or such, even though they've school report that they are fine, we can maybe look at suggesting some bits in there. So the report is quite a holistic look at support at home, family, as well as other services that can use, and then this whole document can then get used in evidence for that as well. So we highlight areas that are working well, obviously. We break down some of the areas of SEN as well. Again, depending on the child, that'll have more or different information in different areas. We then move on to a sensory profile. We look at all of the senses here. We look at touch. We look at this the touch on the outer sort of upper limits of the skin. So that sort of very sensitive, where the clothing could be sensitive to touch, sensitive to hair brushing, all of those things, as well as then the deep pressure as well, and that sense of how deep that pressure is. Some children you might find need really quite deep pressure because of that under-regulated sense. So again, we can pick through all of that and find out what might be causing some of these triggers and some of these more explosive behaviours that we're not understanding. Sight, again, that can sometimes maybe just corrected with things like sunglasses, or understanding that they actually like quite the bright stimulating lights, and getting those, having access to some bright lights and sensory lights and things, as a way of getting that depth of exploration that the sensory brain to body connection is craving. So hearing, taste, smell. So again, with all of these, I try and surmise, what does it mean? What do you need to know, and how this can be supported? So each section has some area of where it is, what it means, and then how it can be supported. We then go on to proprioception, interoception, and vestibular, which is the inner senses that we have additional to our 5 external senses. That can really start to layer up and become quite an interwoven web of communication from brain to body there, and a lot of the sensory profiling can really peel back where some of these sort of either aggressive communication or misunderstood behaviours, those stress behaviour responses. If you've got a really annoying t-shirt on all day and you're still made to sit there with it for 6 odd hours, you're going to be very annoyed, let alone want to do your maths work and so forth. So we surmise that, have a quick overview of sleep, personal hygiene, known sensory triggers. Again, These will vary on the sort of knowledge, understanding, the age of the child, and that sort of understanding. But again, we can start to peel back some of those. We then look at the activities the child will engage with, ones that might cause stress. This, I think, can be really helpful. If other caregivers are needing to spend time with the child, or new teachers, new TAs, and what can really sort of engage that child, kind of quickly in the moment. Again, if you do have things in place like educational healthcare plans or my support plans, it might be that this information is already listed in the child's interests, but it just does a quick backup if you don't have any of that sort of documentation yet. We look at self-esteem. This is really big, I think, in that sort of confidence and presentation of self. It's such a huge area, and again, it can really highlight sometimes that these children just have these really small underlying concerns, whether they're scared of the dark or something like that, that just can sometimes just really mean that they're not able to relax and settle. And sometimes just picking out this information and having it validated can sometimes alleviate that stress on the child, and then a full family connection wise can just make bedtimes easier, hair brushing easier, any of these things combining together. We do look at self-harm as well. We look at body repetitive behaviours, tics, self-injury, and we do again cross on that suicidal thoughts. Hopefully we're on the stage where there isn't any self-harm, self-injury. However, if there is, we also want that to be picked up early, and that understanding of how we can help, how we can support, what can be put in place, and really understand where these behaviours are coming from, and direction for services leading forward as well. So that's kind of on the data capture and more the kind of wordy section of the report. We then look at a bit more hands-on practical side of things, really sort of building a picture up of your child, what their early signs are, what they look like, and how they best regulate. So Adrenaline Man is just that sort of interconnection between from the head moving down and those sort of visible signs of what they might be looking like if they perceive a threat and the adrenaline starts to activate. It's all about the limbic system, the upstairs brain, downstairs brain, fight, flight, freeze, and we're looking for these really early signs. So we have an overview, and then we look at how that looks in your child and what those early signs may look like. We look at the regulatory behaviours that we know that help self-soothe, self-regulate. We look at any anger triggers, and again, if we can, get the child or young person's voice. Now, a really, really important area that I feel is often missed especially sort of at schools because of just the busyness of the day, is what we call our basic needs check-in. This is based on Maslow's hierarchy of need, and it looks to cover originally looking at our basic needs of food, water, clothing, housing, and toileting. We can compare if these needs are being met at home, if they're being met at school, anything that could already be put in place to support that, and any additional notes to that. What we need to be able to do is ensure that a good percentage of the red section, the physiological needs, are met before the child will start to feel safe. Again, the safety needs need to be met across before they can start to feel relaxed and have the self-esteem needed for social engagements. So as you can see, it gradually gets harder and harder to meet and become this sort of self-actualization area. If you imagine sort of top of the pyramid, it is reaching that top of the pyramid, and to reach the top of a pyramid you obviously need good stable foundations underneath. So what this does, it can indicate where a child might be struggling. It could be that obviously they've got loads of love, really supportive family environment, but they're dehydrated at school because they don't have the confidence to get the water bottle, or they don't like water and becoming dehydrated. So you're never going to be able to get that feeling of safety and willingness to learn, because all they can think about is being thirsty, but the needs not being met. So this is quite a good one of really peeling it back. Nothing to do with that sort of educational objectives. It's just what that sort of basic human need level is needed just to be able to sort of not only get by, but then moving into the thrive. We then look at the escalation to dysregulation. So this one here is an overview, and it can look at what those sort of areas could be, what what might be triggering. So we've got original triggers here, full-blown sort of meltdown at the top here, and then obviously the time that the child or even the person needs to reduce that. So from a overall, we then peel that back. As you can see, this one is empty, because what we do is we look at your child specifically. So we look at, what are these early signs? What do we do in this early period to stop the escalation getting as high as it can? If it does, and things are sometimes out of our control, these things do happen, what can we do as caregivers, and almost the protectors of our children, to reduce the impact? What does a child need in this moment? Often it's not a lot, but what they don't need, they don't want shame, they don't, they just need that love and protection. And again, looking at the depletion time and then back up into recovery. We then have a list of repair and connection activities as well. Okay, so that's where we do our basic checks from. And then from there, again, depending on the history of the child, any diagnosis that they might already have, any family history, we can look at things like, screening for ADHD, autism. We can do strengths and difficulties. We can look at, further observations. We can do a more in-depth discussion with parent carers. We can look at anxiety, anger, risk and resilience, and also learning styles as well. If a child's struggling to form those connections at school, really sort of analyse how they best learn and those sorts of things. And as you might suspect, it is written up in a full conclusion as well. So that would be the report you receive, and I'll go through a bit more detail on how we get that information tomorrow.